Welcome to our exploration update. This video accompanies the recent press release that just provides a bit more color on what we're seeing at the Hawkins project in this field season. So this field program is really focused on a robust mapping and soil sampling program across the property, and is looking to build out more targets into our exploration and drilling pipeline, both along strike at the McKinnon zone and outside of the McKinnon zone. And so the geologists just finished their second rotation. They did a lot of mapping, covered a lot of ground, saw a lot of very interesting things, but we're going to focus on two findings that came out of this recent rotation, and that is just to the east of the McKinnon zone and over here in the KB claims to the west here. So the central 15 kilometers is what we're looking at here. All of these squares, these colored squares, are the samples that the geologists took over the first rotation and second rotation. So quite a lot. They covered a lot of ground. They did a lot of sampling. This frame here represents about 300 samples. And they found a lot of interesting things for us to follow up on. But again, we're just focusing this video and press release on to the east of the McKinnon zone here. And what we saw there were outcrops that had McKinnon zone-like rocks along this 2.5 kilometer stretch. So we saw sort of these myelinitized tonalites with coarse quartz veins, cross-cutting, some pyrite in there. And so that adds 2.5 kilometers of evidence that there is continuity there, at least to the host rock. And it also connects the McKinnon zone to these series of prospects over here in the east, which you can see have some very high grade surface sampling here, outcrop. So these are 33 grams per ton, 13, 3.3 grams per ton, and at Naswabin over here, 23, 22, and 7 grams per ton. So for outcrop, that's very high grade. So we're seeing mineralization also occur over this, including these prospects, 3 kilometer stretch, which is almost a doubling of the strike length of the McKinnon zone. Now, just a note on surface sampling and outcrop sampling. When you think about the results from outcrop sampling, your expectations of gold grade are going to be significantly lowered. And that is because when you're sampling outcrop, you're sampling a much smaller part of any gold or metals system. And you can think about it like this. When you're drilling, let's say you drill a 200-meter length and you sample every meter, you're getting a 200-meter view of any of those metals systems. But when you're at an outcrop, here in the boreal forest, lots of vegetation, you might only have an outcrop a meter wide. Then you take your rock hammer and you chip off some sample, and you're just going to get a few fistfuls of that sample and put it in a bag and send it to the lab. And so what that means is you're really getting less than a meter of sample of a sample view into a metal system. So you can imagine it like if you took your 200-meter drill hole and just randomly picked a meter there that you're going to sample, and that's supposed to represent your system. So that's why when you see outcrop samples of even 0.1 gram per ton, which doesn't sound high, but that would be something that would start to pique your interest, that there is some sort of system there. If you see 0.5 gram per ton, that's something that's enough to make you go back and take a closer look at that area. So when you see these Dubroy and Naswabin grab samples here, those are very high for outcrop sampling. And so far, most of our samples from this program have not yet been returned, but an early return did come up with 2 grams per ton over here. And this prospect here is outside of that resource. So that's going to be something we're definitely going to go and follow up on. Now, over the past 6 months, what we've done is do a pretty robust data compilation review, looking at VTEM, AirMag, structural interpretations, historic filings, to develop for us high priority areas, or areas that we think have a higher chance of having metals deposits across the Hawkins property to start prioritizing for our mapping program. And so this field season, we want to get all of these blue areas, those are the high priority areas, all of these blue areas done. And in this transparent red, you can see the areas that we've already mapped. We've already covered quite a bit of those high priority targets. So we're on track for finishing this program by the end of this field season. And what came of this program is our second finding from this rotation, which is a series of Gossin outcrops. And so just for location reference, you can see the McKinnon zone, 3.5 kilometers over here, goldfields, and then these chain of Gossin outcrops. So it's in the western part of the property package, independent from the McKinnon zone. And so here's a picture of what one of those look like. Why Gossin is relevant is that Gossin is sort of the weathered, leached part, outcrop of a system that contains usually irons, sulfides, and is often associated with metals like copper, lead, zinc, gold. And so that's why these are important outcrops to find. Now, because these are leached and weathered, it's possible that there's been so much leaching that you're not actually going to pick up values of copper, lead, zinc, nickel, gold, but it still represents a system below it that likely contains something of one of those metals. What we're looking at here is a satellite view of where those outcrops were found. We've traced those outcrops here in blue, in the transparent blue, and this is 500 meters long, anywhere from 15 meters wide in the east here to 50 meters wide in the west. And so while we're also looking for presence of those metals, we also want to see a footprint, a potential economic footprint. And so the other aspect of this finding, this past rotation, was that this is a fairly large potential footprint of those Gossinous outcrops that kind of trace along this blue area here. So it's very exciting. We're waiting for the samples. As we wait for those results to come back from the lab, we're going to continue with our mapping program across the Hawkins project here, hoping to finish those high priority areas by the end of this field season, and we'll keep you updated as we go along.